Hey, everybody. Welcome to our latest installment of MSP Business School. Today, I'm joined by, of course, my friendly co-hosts, Rob and Tim. But I think many of you who are watching this on YouTube right now, you might recognize this other friendly face that we have joining us. We have a very special guest today, Robb Ray, joining us. As most of you know, Rob heads up channels over at Datto. And if you haven't run into Rob yet, you will. So
give it time.
Yep, you're not from this industry.
We get to hear the industry tell the story about how many days Robb Ray spent in hotels during his first year with Datto. So, we're shocked that we caught him at home. But with that being said, first I'd like to thank you for joining us today, Rob. And maybe for, as Robb Rogers put it, the one person who doesn't know you, maybe tell us a little bit about your background and how you got to Datto.
Yeah, absolutely. So senior vice president of business development at Datto. Business development, in essence, I own the community, the face of the organization, the way in which we work with our partners, engaging with our partners. Datto is a channel-only organization, so super important for us that our community continues to engage with us, and that we continue to be, as we grow, continue to understand the nuances of managed services, the nuances of small, medium businesses, all those needs and all those things. So in essence, that's myself. And I've got a team of people that help me do those kinds of things. My background's pretty simple. I actually came from a finance background, believe it or not. I grew up wanting to be an accountant. And then realized that there wasn't a ton of money being made in that space, or I wasn't good enough to make a ton of money in that space, and accidentally backed into a job in IT with a company called Compact Computers back in the day, which eventually got acquired by HP. Sold hardware. My job was for the province of Ontario, because originally I'm from Toronto. I would negotiate all the margins on hardware for, back then, called resellers. And double-digit margins on desktops and notebooks, and anybody that's been around for a while can remember those days. You'd sell your IT services based on your hardware margins. Forget about services. Yep. And then we saw this radical shift happen in the market where hardware margins got deteriorated next to nothing. All of a sudden, vendors are starting to sell direct to end users, and the channel needed to reinvent itself. And that's when we first started seeing managed service providers come up, all of a sudden charging for the services that they were providing as opposed to making money on the hardware. So myself personally, I'm watching this and I'm thinking, okay, it's great working for a large organization like HP, but there's got to be better money to be made as we see this movement, that the shift that the channel is actually going through from reseller to managed services. So I found a small little RMM company called Level Platforms up in Canada, joined it because, if you think about what is kind of the core of being a managed service provider is you need visibility into your end users' networks. And what a better way than RMM. Fast forward 20 years later, we're all still trying to figure out how RMM works and the best ways for it to actually work. They're good, but they're still not, ideal. But they're getting better and better. But still, I believe a cornerstone of the managed services space. And you just fast forward from there. I found managed service providers grew with the MSPs, provided a lot of MSP education. What's going to help us grow? Where are we going? What's the future look like? And ultimately, that's how I ended up with Datto and changed the backup game into the business continuity and became, again, a cornerstone of that. And, continue to see this market evolve.
I would have loved to have seen Robb Ray as an accountant.
I know. Could you imagine?
His little name tag.
It doesn't even compute.
Sitting there's pocket protector.
Locked in one room all day long.
I love numbers. Numbers, for me, they don't lie. There's truth in numbers, and it's problem solving, and it's everything is in its place kind of thing. And that's the OCD part of my life. I had to park that in order to do what I do today. But yes, it was boring, and yes, I'm glad I'm not doing it anymore. So,
you touched on a little bit about
I guess.
talking.
Sorry, go ahead. No, I was just going to say. So, we were talking a little bit before about it. Look, the shift that's happened since COVID started in the MSP space has been significant, right? I mean, everybody's living it. A lot of MSPs are seeing increased revenues because of it. And one thing that we started talking about last few podcasts of 2021 was what we expect 2022 and beyond to look like. Curious to kind of get your thoughts on what you think is going to transpire in the coming months and years.
This is, for me, it's an exciting time, right? And let's all think, we've been at this for a while, and chances are a lot of your listeners or your viewers have been at this for a while. There was a time where managed service providers, and I'm not just talking about MSPs themselves, but I'm talking about the vendors that support that community and everything like that. We were kind of this like redheaded stepchild, no offense, Tim, but we were this redheaded stepchild that kind of sat in the corner, and we all did our thing, and we all played in our little playground, and nobody wanted to come in, and we all were quite happy where we were. But it was always this fighting for respect level that we were trying to get to. And as soon as you ventured out, nobody had heard of Datto or ConnectWise or AutoTask or all these tools, right? It was all this kind of little corner of IT. And then all of a sudden, larger vendors started realizing that the MSP space owns the SMB market. And you just cannot, especially these days, you cannot get into the SMB market without having a channel program for managed service providers. It's that simple. And I belong to a few IT executive groups, and they're very large IT companies where you've got these channel chiefs that are trying to figure out how to sell to SMB, and they can't, because they want to sell direct, because that's how they do it in enterprise. But they can't do it in SMB, because as soon as they call an SMB, they're saying, no, you call my MSP, I want nothing to do with this. And then they call the MSP, and the MSP is like, dude, you've been ignoring us for 20 years. I'm not interested in doing business with you. I've been competing against you for 20 years. I'm not interested in doing business with you. So there's this interesting shift of not only the attention that's coming on the MSP space, but think about the billions of dollars that have come into this space. And I'll use Datto as an example. And I don't want to, this isn't a pitch for Datto or anything along those lines, but we're a small Connecticut startup. We had a young kid that had a good idea, and now we're publicly traded on the New York Stock Exchange with I think close to a $4 billion market cap. How the hell does a small Connecticut company that services nothing but MSPs get to that point? It's because people are recognizing the value of what a managed service provider brings. Now, to go back to the original question, is this, for me, is actually more exciting, because what's happening is you're starting to see all this money come in. You're starting to see all this attention, which means we're getting better products, we're getting better technology, we're getting it faster, so that the MSPs themselves can deliver better products and services to their ultimate end users. And in that mind, that means that we're all going to be more profitable. We're all going to have a lot more confidence in what we're selling. We're all going to be able to deliver better services. And therefore, that's going to trigger a whole bunch of new things and growth things that we're just not used to in the space.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And with all the money that's coming in on the good side, there's also, the black hat side, right? All the bad guys are recognizing that the MSP space is where to be. Right. So, what are your thoughts on that side of it as we're moving forward? I think I saw a presentation you did one time where I think it was the FBI put out a bulletin where they were talking about MSPs beware. Look out.
Yeah, absolutely. And God bless them. Not the FBI. I mean, sure, the FBI, but the bad guys too. Without the bad guys, you don't need good guys.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. So, so in essence, it's this perpetual cycle of trying to stay one step ahead of everybody. And the good news is that the MSPs are actually doing such an effective job at it. And again, because we're in this dark corner before where nobody was paying attention to us, and that included the bad actors, now all of a sudden we're getting the attention. And it's not just the SMB end users, it's the actual managed service providers and the vendors that serve them that are getting this negative attention right now. So this idea that we all need to stay one step ahead of it. The good news is that, as much as we're all pressing the urgency button and we're all terrified button, this is a journey. I actually was thinking back, I was going back through some stuff. I started talking about ransomware back in 2016. And I remember when I first brought it up, people were looking at me going, nah, you're just trying to create fear. And it's this FUD thing. And this isn't going to be a thing. And now there's an entire industry.
How you like me now?
That really talks about how the cycles change so quick too. Because I say that all the time. I changed my hat from being an MSP to a vendor right around that same time, Rob. and ransomware was barely a blip on the radar for the MSP at that point. And now it's literally, we're building compliance programs and things like that to help support them. And it's just amazing how things become cyclical in our industry so quickly and change so quickly. And that's something that I think.
But you say quickly. See, here's the other part of this, Brian. That was 6 years ago. And it just seems quick because it doesn't seem like that long ago to us. And remember, we did lose 2 years of the coma that we've been in for the last
well, that's true.
pandemic. But at the same time, as much as I'm thinking back going, wow, that wasn't that long ago. But to be honest, it's 6 years, and there's still MSPs and MSP vendors that haven't figured this out. We're still running into problems and issues and open RDP sessions and no 2FA and stupid crap like that. We still run into it despite the fact that we've all been fighting this battle, which goes back to the idea that we're on a journey here, right? And this journey, as much as we all, and it's basically cybersecurity is what I'm referring to, we have time, right? We have time, but we need to be paying attention to it. And we're on the wrong path as a channel, as vendors, as MSPs, we're on and going down the wrong path. We need to stop. We need to take a step back and we need to get on the right path. And this is the cyber resiliency path that, we've spent a lot of time talking about. I know my competitors are spending a lot of time talking about it because this is not a Datto problem. This isn't any of my competitors' problems. This isn't an MSP problem. This is an industry problem. And we're all going to be, painted with the scarlet letter R for ransomware if we don't do the right thing for everybody. And I think that's where you're going to see some radical changes. I think 2021 or 22, we're primed for this. And I think it's going to be a massive opportunity for everybody in this space. And I do believe that the SMB market will have better security support, better security services, and better security products than the mid and large market will. And that's purely because of the MSPs.
You've talked a little bit about cyber resiliency, but there are other things in some of the concerns we're going to have from a security standpoint. But what else are you seeing in the future right now? And some of the other things that MSPs need to start thinking about as they prepare to go into 2022 and beyond?
I'm looking at this from through chaos comes opportunity, through issues and problems comes opportunity, right? So it's this whole looking for silver linings. And if we take a look back at what happened throughout the pandemic, which still is continuing, things are open, things are closed, people are all over the place.
Depends on where you are. And
Yeah, exactly. And what country you're in, or even what state you're in, and sometimes even what town you're in, depends on the attitude of what's going on. And we're still all pretty ambiguous as to what is going to happen. The CDC one day says everything is horrible, and the next day they're peeling back, peeling back quarantine periods and stuff like that. So, we're all kind of like guessing at this particular point. However, there's a couple things that are really, really clear. What happened and what I believe really came to the forefront was the fact that people recognized the value of the technology that they've got. Think about the work from home movement that actually happened. Like literally in March of 2020, everybody stopped going to an office and needed to work somewhere else. Everybody worldwide. This isn't just a hurricane came through. Who cares what happens in hurricane country? This is everybody worldwide. So that when we still can deal with these supply chain issues on shortages around technology. However, people are working and they're doing their jobs, and a lot of businesses stayed in business as a result of MSPs being able to mobilize small medium business into a home environment.
Yeah,
right. And the fact that they were able to turn on a dime, and nobody was planning for this. It's not like we all had tons of stock of laptops and monitors and routers that we could plug in at home.
Webcams.
Right. Yeah. Nobody was ready for that.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Remember that?
Right. No, I remember trying to get it. Things were delayed for like 5 weeks. It was nuts.
But the fact that the technology was kind of the angle of all this, and what enabled people to be able to go and work and continue to work, and businesses continue to stay open. This is where the MSPs thrived. And, at the time, it looked like we were chasing our tails and our hair was on fire. But when you take a step back and look at what happened in the mobilization and what happens today as the work from anywhere movement, where, today I'm in my home office, tomorrow I want to be at my cottage, the next day I want to be on the beach, the next day I might be back in the office. And it might cycle through again, depending on what happens. And the next virus or whatever comes about. I think the attitude towards technology means that we're just going to have this dynamic, and it should be part of every MSP conversation, where it's not as simple as, hey, let's go protect this building that all your employees are in. We now need to look at it from many, many different angles. That means many, many more different endpoints, different pieces of technology that are necessary. You know, I used to need one monitor, now I need two because I might be in two different places. Like, just little things like that are now starting to expand, and it's going to create a lot more opportunity there.
I totally agree. You know, one of the things that, you know, we're seeing out there on our side is we're having a lot more conversations about what do we do with the brick and mortar buildings that we have now that we have everybody working from home. We want to shrink our space and move into a smaller space. So there's projects being built out there that, you know, to get them out of that big workspace, because everybody's working from home now and they like it that way, and then the employees like it that way, and that shift has happened. And so there's a lot of these projects that are being built about moving from this location down to the smaller location, you know, to save money on the, you know, on that side. So there's just so many opportunities that were built from this. It's amazing.
I've got friends of mine I just live in a small town in Connecticut, right? And I've got friends of mine that own businesses, like real legit multi-million-dollar businesses, that have their servers sitting at home in their basements now, because they had to move them out of their offices for accessibility. So they moved them out of the offices, they relocated to their home. Their home IP company is now providing services towards it, which is ridiculous. And now all of a sudden they're realizing they're not going to go back. They've let the lease on the building expire, they can't continue to run a server rack in their home, right? In their home, right? There's not secure at all. The kids are playing around. Like,
what's this button
so stupid? But you know, this is now all of a sudden you talk about digital transformation, you talk about cloud migration, you talk about all these things that MSPs are primed for. So what's funny is I go to a party, and it's an outdoor party, and a bunch of friends are getting together, and you know, he's a friend of a friend. And I get there, and immediately I can see he makes eye contact with me and comes running over. And usually that means, can you fix my computer? Because once somebody figures out you're in IT, that's what they want, right? And that's what I'm thinking. And he says, what do I do with this? I've got, you know, I run this like $10 million business, and everything that I own is on this server, and it's sitting in my basement with my kids sitting on it, drinking chocolate milk. What do I do? And I'm like, dude.
Not that.
Exactly. So this is, you know, what did I do? I introduced him to an MSP friend of mine, and now he's migrating it all to the cloud. And, you know, he's going to have it protected and backed up, and he's going to pay money now for a pretty, you know, serious operation. And he's now talking about risk and cybersecurity and all those types of things. And yeah, so it's like, these are the conversations that we're starting to see more and more as we mature, and as the SMB market matures when it comes to its approach to technology.
And I think we've personally here at OSR, we've talked to a number of MSPs recently who they've made a pivot where they're just cloud-based, 100% clients all over the country. Just since the pandemic, you know, they had their brick and mortar, they might still have it, but they are just like, I'm out. Going cloud-based.
This was a trigger to start taking it. I mean, we all knew this was going to happen. But this was the trigger to get things actually moving. This was kind of like the pandemic, and working from home was kind of the thing that kind of broke the logjam to the point where now it's like, well, we might as well invest in this now. Right.
Yeah. And now you can't get employees that you're hiring to come back into an office, right? They want the freedom to, you know, have the work from home option out there. The whole thing, it was just one big paradigm shift. It's nuts.
Yeah.
I've been using the analogy, and I keep getting teased for it, but I've been using the analogy, but I like it. So I'm going to tell you what the analogy is that we've all been focusing around building the castle, right? Which is the office. We've been working on securing the castle, and, you know, reinforcing the walls and doing everything that you would do to reinforce a castle. But now all of a sudden we're not allowed to stay in the castle anymore, because that's where COVID is. All of a sudden everybody left the castle, and they're sitting in their straw huts outside the castle. And then now the bad guys have easier access to them. And we saw this. We've seen a significant uptake. All the cybersecurity reports are indicating uptake on cyber activity, with the exception of, I don't know if you guys know this or not, the first 2 weeks of the pandemic, cyber attacks actually went down significantly. And that's because even the bad guys needed to find work from home situations so that they could go back and humanize.
I have heard that. That's
pain is real,
funny.
right?
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, like we went from everybody in the castle, now everybody's in the grass huts, and we all got to get out there. And now we not only have to make sure the castle's protected should we ever go back, but now we also got to protect these grass huts. So all of a sudden, it's like there's more to be done, and it's all prime for MSP.
Oh yeah,
very much
so
agree.
I think, when we were talking before, Rob, I think you had a third area that you saw some growth for the MSP, and that was in the co-managed workspace. Maybe we can talk a little bit about that, because I agree, especially with the proliferance of cybersecurity tools and the sharing of liability being out there, you really can see that there's an opportunity in a land grab that should be done by the MSPs who are willing to go into those co-managed environments, but some are a little antsy about that, And
I can understand why. And if there's anything that's probably the most exciting out of all of this, it's probably this part of it. And I think you can easily predict that at some point in time, any organization, anywhere, regardless of size, it just doesn't make sense to have in-house IT people. Like it just doesn't at a certain point. Maybe to protect like internal infrastructure, but as far as anything that's coming outside, things are moving too quickly. Technology is too complicated to have somebody in-house doing these things. And co-managed IT, to be honest, if you talk to a lot of MSPs, they've been doing it for a while. They've been working and that, have some level of project work with larger organizations. But when you look at the mass job shortage that we've got, especially in the IT space, when you look at the whole concept of outsourcing is cheaper than in-house, when you look at the technologies complicated, data migration, cloud technology, even cybersecurity, like these are things that you cannot just take a course once a year and be up to speed on what's going on in IT. These are the things that you need to be constantly on top of. And again, prime for MSPs. The fear, Brian, going back to where you're talking about, and the hesitation comes from the idea that we've all been trained and we've spent 2 decades training ourselves on complete outsource. Go into a shop and here's why you want to outsource your IT to me. Now, all of a sudden, you're going into a shop and instead of complete outsource, you're saying to the IT guy, which historically you have replaced, you're now having a conversation with the IT guy to go, I can help you. I can make you look good. I can make sure that, these things happen, and stay in place and all that. So it's a different sale. And I think that's where people get a little bit gun shy. The messaging is a little bit different. The language is a little bit different, but there is massive opportunity there for the channel. And I'll tell you, I'll go back to these large vendors that are out there providing IT services. Their biggest fear is the MSP channel coming up market, because they haven't developed a relationship with the MSP channel to the point where the MSP will sell their stuff, which means if the MSPs get into the mid-market and large market, these technology companies will get shut out. So even they are now starting to think, how do we train people properly so that we can bring an MSP into these markets? That's more money, more time, more energy that's going into training MSPs to be better. From an MSP perspective, why you want to go up market? When you go up market, you have organizations that take their technology seriously and they pay their bills on time. Who doesn't want that? Who doesn't want more money and on time money? Then you're not dealing with a lot of the nagging issues that we have in the SMB space.
The opportunities are huge.
I've said it for, for as long as we've had a company, even going back to when, olden days when we were a lead gen company, I never understood why MSPs wouldn't go after co-managed opportunities. There's a play there. There always has been, always. And it's only getting more complicated, and you need to be more specialized. And in doing that, the only way to do it is to outsource at least a portion of what you're doing.
I think part of the issue, Tim, is that we started identifying, and I'll take some blame for this, because we started identifying one-time revenue versus recurring revenue. And a lot of the co-managed opportunities generally were project work, which are considered one-time revenue, not recurring revenue. So we would go, well, you're not an MSP. You have to generate recurring revenue. Get rid of those contracts, fire those customers, have them sign a contract with you or get rid of them. And it wasn't necessarily the right approach. And what happened was the MSPs kept the most lucrative ones. And our numbers indicate that I think it's close to 65% of all revenue being generated by an MSP as a whole is being done recurring wise, which means there's still 35% of that revenue that's being done through project work. That project work, now what we need to do is, instead of looking at that as bad, get rid of it, we need to look at it as, how do we take this and turn it into this? How do you take a one-time opportunity with a larger end user and turn it into a recurring revenue opportunity? And that's the again, similar to cybersecurity, we have some time, we have some learnings to do, we have some education that we need to do, but I think we're going to get there, and I think it's going to be, in another 6 years from now, we'll be looking back going, co-managed is a pretty significant portion of the MSP business.
Rob, I'm glad you kind of brought up that transition from project to recurring. In my last life in the MSP space, we did a lot of mid-sized to large co-managed, and it started with the project. But if you got creative and you looked at what was going on, they wanted you to also support it. They wanted you to own it. They wanted you to take that other long tail. So we had groups that were doing desktop deployments as a service. We had groups that were doing, HV maintenance as a service, which was really swap outs, but in places like the House of the Mouse down in Disney, where you would have tons of AV to change out. And you were able to build some really lucrative revenue streams, as my lights go out here, revenue streams doing that kind of stuff. So, I'm really glad that you talked a little bit about the mind shift, because I think it's getting out of that pure bias of what we were taught for so long. We need to be a pure play MSP. We need to get that recurring revenue only, and we need to look at ways that we can keep total control and ownership, because sometimes there's power in not having all the control. You also don't get all the headaches.
Yeah, completely agreed. And I think the other part of this too, Brian, back versus, the days when we started doing this, the tools are better, the technology is better, you can stand behind it better. Like, how many times have we seen, and it's been a long time since we've seen it, but a cloud-based company, all of a sudden, like, this happened in the backup space. A couple backup companies, all of a sudden one day you get a letter from them saying, hey, we're out of business, move your data, figure this out, right? And we're gone. Like, we're not seeing that stuff anymore, or we shouldn't be, and fortunately haven't been. But those are the kinds of things where, as the market has matured, we now can go in and have those conversations at an intelligent level, and then again take advantage of the job shortage, like massive. You think it's hard for us to go and find technology people in the technology space? Imagine a manufacturer trying to hire an IT person. Like, it's insane. It's absolutely insane. And why not take the opportunity to outsource at this point?
I totally agree. Well, fellas, we're coming up to our time here. Rob, really appreciate it. Just want to, let everybody know out there that we will be including Robb Ray's LinkedIn profile with the podcast. And also this episode will be up on mspbusinessschool.com or anywhere that you get your podcast. Rob, before we go, any closing thoughts?
So I just, so for me, and I think this is easy for me to say, and much more harder to execute. Don't stand still. This isn't the time, right? This is the time to get super aggressive. Times are good. The water's great. Let's jump in, let's go. And if there's anything that I can do from an education standpoint, we've got a great funding MDF program. Anything that we can do, education, assets, money to help grow that, please let me know. I'm more than happy to jump in there and do this.
Great. Fellas, it was great chatting with everybody again here today. And we thank you so much, and we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us, Rob.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.